I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor, the podcast. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Doing good. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm here.
As opposed to there?
Or every other where. So we have a bit of a situation in Fresno, and it is very sad.
Uh-oh. What is our situation?
Well, Bitwise, a company that grew like wildfire here in Fresno, has been turned upside down. The CEOs, the co-CEOs have been fired by the board of directors. There is now an interim president.
Has there been some shenanigans going on?
It appears that there were some shenanigans going on, and apparently a lot of them. Not just some simple shenanigans, but lots and lots of shenanigans.
Did I see somewhere out there in cyber world that they're being sued for around $6 to $8 million?
They are being sued, and it's not the first lawsuit against them. In fact, they were promised by the federal government, our good old federal government, through the state of California, who is administering the money, that if they did not lay off any of their employees due to COVID, they would receive $26,000 per employee. And they did their very best to keep their employees hired and not let go during these difficult times. But the government was taking so long to dole out these funds that they received a loan from a company that basically said, for a fee of what you're going to get from the IRS, we will loan you the money to cover some of your difficulties now. And then when you get that refund or that money from the government, you just turn it over straight to us. And they agreed. It turns out that not only did they get this loan for the money, they also did not turn over the funds from the government to the loaning agency as required by their agreement.
So they got a little greedy.
They got a lot greedy.
Saw all that money coming in and said, ooh, I want to buy a new car.
Yeah.
I want to live like Elon Musk.
Yes.
Elon Musk light.
So this was a $6 million loan, as you noted just a moment ago. But it already happened. This lawsuit was one of the first filed, but it wasn't discovered until all of their other troubles came to light. So the company was given the employee retention credit of $26,000 for every employee they retained in 2020 and 2021. And then the investor, called 1861 Acquisition, gave the loan over, and the IRS was supposed to send the money directly to 1861 Acquisition, but apparently it went to Bitwise, and it went to Bitwise in December of 2022. The company violated the terms of their agreement because they deposited the check directly into their account instead of endorsing it over to 1861 Acquisition, and then they lied about it.
So then it sounds like once they're prosecuted, they're going to spend some time in jail.
It might appear so. So the investor filed the lawsuit against Bitwise April 4th. So this is one of their monetary setbacks that they were referring to, was this lawsuit, but apparently a settlement was reached on April 25th, and they promised to pay back the $6 million it owed plus $200,000 in interest. It's unclear if they've paid that back or not. That was in April. Now, a new company from Texas has filed a $33 million lawsuit against Bitwise, saying that Bitwise and several of its subsidiaries concealed from the plaintiff their intentional breaches of the joint venture agreement and self-dealing, so they were giving themselves loans from the company to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. So they are asking Fresno County Superior Court to freeze everything of Bitwise and not to allow them access to any of their money?
I would. I would freeze all the assets. I would remove them from their homes and on and on. So let's back up about 4 paces. Just in case our listeners don't know who or what Bitwise is, exactly what does Bitwise do?
So a lot of people actually don't know what Bitwise does, because myself included. So I thought they were strictly a company that bought real estate and then held individual offices for people who wanted to rent office space but didn't want to rent an entire office floor or a big section. So you can rent small spaces and everybody could work together on their separate ventures. So they called it the Hive, and they had what appeared to be individual spaces for rent. I was wrongly under the assumption that they bought the real estate and then they were subleasing to all of these small groups. I did not realize that they were merely renting the buildings, and they quit paying rent. And then they also did not pay the taxes they were supposed to pay, because they had over 300 employees in Fresno alone, and they were not paying all of their taxes. So Bitwise itself had multiple different agencies that did various business ventures. It wasn't just a single entity doing one thing. So they worked with individuals who needed space to rent. They worked as a group to try and renovate and revitalize dilapidated areas and turn them into a group rental. Do you have more on Bitwise?
I do, and it's actually kind of interesting. Kind of reminds me of the Biden corporations they developed to move money around. Bitwise Industries is a transformative tech company. We build scalable digital solutions utilizing powerful platforms like Salesforce and DocuSign, along with expert digital product development using a representative workforce in underestimated cities. Bitwise has pioneered a movement in the industry regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is reflected in faces, lives, and humans we employ, those in which we partner, and communities we mean to lift up. That's their mission statement off of their website.
So clearly more than just a mutual working location. And in fact, they had at least 900 employees that they ended up furloughing out of these cities, which includes Fresno. 1/3 of those were from Fresno, 300. And they had just taken on some capital to work in Chicago and build up there.
Well, yes, and it sounds like they may have put up some smoke and mirrors, in my humble opinion, that they were using this diversity and all these claims to success and leadership to build a product that really was not real.
It does sound like they kept doing kind of a Ponzi thing where you get one investor and then you have to pay off the backside of it. So the last person in gets nothing. And they were paying some of those first people out, but they still could not keep up with the amount of money they were spending because they got a $6 million loan and they went through that. They had $33 million from this company in Texas that they're seeking for damages. They received some from a company that wanted them to build up in Chicago, but yet they had no money.
Yes, and all of the poor employees that some of them probably gave up other careers to go to work for them are now going to lose. And depending on how much money the executives were able to bleed off of this company relative to their fines, penalties, and potential jail time, they may still walk away, just like some pharmaceutical companies do, with a profit.
The little guy doesn't win.
Never does a little guy win. Never, never, never. You know who else is not winning?
Who is not winning?
Taxpayers and entities that are helping support this addiction called homelessness. And by addiction, I mean the people that actually are aiding and abetting them and not working on solutions like you've talked about in multiple podcasts to help get these people some help, cure them, and send them in the right direction. The reason I say that is I was reading a news article this morning about migrants that have now been flown from Texas to Sacramento in a private airplane, approximately 20 of them. And it just kind of made me think, okay, I know we're doing this cross country. We're moving migrants from Texas to Florida, Texas to New York, New York to Virginia, just bouncing them all over the place. And they called every one of them a migrant. Well, what is the definition of a migrant? Do you know?
The technical definition off the top of my head, no, but it's generally an individual who is leaving one area to immigrate to another area. And it can be for a variety of reasons, including, say, economic reasons. They are looking for better economic opportunities. They are typically referred to as economic migrants, moving from one location to the other for the purposes of a better life, making more money, sending it home, etc.
Correct. And here is right out of Merriam-Webster. A migrant is a person whom regularly moves in order to find work. And I found it interesting that it did qualify that by saying in the harvesting industry. So basically there's no other workers out there except for farm workers that are migrants, according to Merriam-Webster. Based on that definition.
Yes.
Because I've heard them banty them being government officials, people that are helping them come into the country. I've heard them called migrants. I've heard them called immigrants.
So there's generally word use issues, shall we say, because some will also call them asylum seekers.
Yes, and you have to be an asylum seeker before you can move into refugee status.
In our laws for the United States, you generally apply inside the country for asylum, or if you are outside of your own country attempting to leave, but you haven't been resettled yet, then you are a refugee. So you have left your country and you've gone into, say, a refugee camp, and you have not necessarily been assigned anywhere in the world to go to yet. We have all different countries that will say we'll accept so many refugees per year. So, for instance, the gal Ilhan Omar, Representative Ilhan Omar, she was originally born in Somalia, and then she went to a refugee camp when she fled war-torn Somalia, and I believe her refugee camp was in Kenya. She stayed there until her family was selected to get status somewhere and come as a refugee and then get status. And it happened to be inside the United States is where they were selected to go to.
So she went from asking for political asylum because of the war-torn country she lives in to refugee status.
Technically, if you were to get a green card and you were an immigrant, it would say refugee if you came from the country and got permission before you arrived in the United States, or if you were already in the United States and then that's when you said you need help, that's asylee status. So they're two different codes, but they kind of mean the same thing. Yes and no.
Okay. Well, that's kind of what made me look, because I've heard them call these people that are illegally crossing the border as immigrants as well. So I had to look up what the definition of immigrant was, and it's any person lawfully in the United States who is not a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or person admitted under a non-immigrant category as defined by the INA section 101-915.
Yeah, so an immigrant is generally thrown around as a generic term. So you can be an intending immigrant as well. Were you an intending immigrant or not an intending immigrant? In this particular case, the people would love to have status, presumably here in the United States, so they would have the intention of hoping to become an immigrant. Why is that different from, say, a visitor? So if you apply for a visitor visa to the United States, one of the questions that we'll ask is, do you intend to immigrate to the United States? Because if you are an intending immigrant, there is a different category for you to apply under versus if you are just a visitor and applying for a non-immigrant visa. So you have non-immigrants, people who are not intending to stay in the United States to live, just here to visit, maybe do a quick job if they have some work to do and leave, versus individuals who their intention is to stay.
Cool. So it sounds like only a handful of people like yourself know how to actually interpret what a person is that's coming up through the border or has been moved around or is legal versus illegal. And that's part of wherein lies the problem is they need to go back and identify these things properly and totally change our immigration system to make sure it works properly.
Yes.
And we slow down the influx of people, since it was interesting that I always try to look at article per article, and the one right below this one was the homeless population in California, because we're going to talk a little bit about California today. And the homeless in Fresno and Madera County, where we live, has increased 15.8% in 2022.
Despite all of the millions and billions of dollars we've poured in across California to end homelessness? That's weird.
And one thing that the producer and writer of the article was very proud of was the fact that there has been a 12.8% decrease in the number of unsettled homeless people, or those that are living or not living in shelters. And shelters can be identified as a tent, an old broken down car, a local church, wherever they may be staying. Well, it's interesting also that in 2019 in Fresno, there was only 1,486 homeless, and there is now 4,239, which has increased dramatically. But they were also proud in this article that back in 2011, they almost eliminated homelessness in Fresno and Madera. They were able to decrease it by 69% or 68.2 or somewhere in that area.
So what worked then that isn't working now, or what did we do then that we aren't doing now? Did it say?
It did not. And there's really no answer by any of these experts why there was an outflux of people and then an influx. And I would think that it would tend to be more free money per se, which some of the ones that came in were looking for something. If they left the city and county and they came back, there must have been a driving force that brought them back here to Fresno. But it goes way beyond that, because if you look at what our governor and others have spent on homelessness, like you said, it's insane, the amount of dollars. And we've, in the 2023-2024 California budget, asked for $20 billion additional for homeless. $20 billion with a B. I didn't realize we have a housing authority here in Fresno that works with folks that can't afford homes. So there's 50,000 residents in Fresno that can get a housing voucher, or they can get into housing authority sponsored homes.
Is that Section 8?
That would be Section 8. So just looking at the number of homeless that we see, looking at what the state is giving us, there is a lot of hidden homeless and hidden underserved people in their communities.
And it seems like with all of the money that has been spent, a big misuse of funds.
Absolutely.
Well, and as you've noted before, how many of the companies that are helping the homeless are paying some CEO, VP, president, whomever, insert nice fancy title, director of operations, a ton of money, and then doing nothing with it. They're just getting the money and they're not helping those they claim to help.
Well, one theme that I've seen that goes way back to 2007, when this homeless thing really started coming to light, was the fact that the underlying theme is always affordable housing. Affordable housing? Affordable housing. Well, it appears that it may potentially not be affordable housing. It might be exactly what you said or have said multiple podcasts, is that there is a drug issue, there is a mental health issue, and although they may be addressing that on the surface, they're not diving into it deep enough to go after the root cause and really try to fix it. You're never going to stop it, but at least you can slow the numbers down.
Correct. You're not going to stop. Unfortunately, people are going to be born with mental health issues. And there are functioning adults who have mental health issues that I say functioning kind of loosely, but functioning adults that have mental health issues that are maybe able to get enough money to go from one place to the next or keep some food in their kids' bellies, but otherwise they're in massive amounts of debt because they choose to spend unwisely and freely. And then if they can't pay their rent, that's on them because they have the money and they have the ability, but having a mental health issue, we're not helping them to help themselves. So we've just allowed it to go unchecked. And the answer wouldn't be, okay, well, we'll pay for your housing, so that's not an issue. So you can be even more unwise with your choices and do more damage in other areas of your life.
Correct. And if we're going to continue to have these little drug dens, like up in the Bay Area, where they can just go get free drugs or methadone or whatever the clinical terms are for a drug that makes them high, that still kills them, just like the real stuff. We're never going to attack the drug side of it. We may get after the mental health side of it. Within the military, we have a lot of homeless. But in this article, the person that was writing it talked about how military people are overused when it comes to homeless, that they're overrepresented.
Oh, they get too much help?
I don't think she was saying too much help. I think she's saying the numbers aren't as people are throwing out there when you always hear people say, well, you know what, military vets go overseas.
Okay. So the homeless vet problem isn't as bad as claimed.
Correct, is what she is saying.
Well, I do know that the VA has been striving to help homeless veterans be housed. And whatever goal they set for themselves last fiscal year, they actually beat it. So we may see true help there. I'm not sure. I would love to see true help there because at the VA, they would have the ability to help the whole person because then they can get medical care and treatment, mental health care, maybe addiction counseling, whatever is needed along with the housing. But something we've seen at the VA and I've experienced personally is the inability to get appointments. So I had an appointment canceled in February of 2022 that I finally received a call in May of 2023 for rescheduling and asking if I still wanted it. And the next available date is October of 2023.
So let me use a weird analogy. If you're out swimming in the ocean and you get bit by a shark, does the shark know whether you are a military veteran, a common person off the street, black, white, brown, green, purple, yellow? Yes or no?
I think it just knows that you might be tasty.
Correct. So then does it matter to anyone whether the homeless person is a veteran, former school teacher, business executive, or just like you said, a person that was unfortunately born with a mental deficit and they're just a functioning adult?
We should be helping the whole person, regardless of who they are, where they came from, and their background. But as you've noted, we should be looking into the whole person. Okay, you were a former Stanford graduate, you went to Harvard, you went to Yale. There are many, unfortunately, there are many people who went to very high level places, have high degrees or previously held high positions that ended up in a situation for one reason or another where they are homeless. Maybe they're drug addicted or their mental health issue just came to light and deteriorated them quicker than they could get help for. So let's help that whole person, regardless of who they are, where they came from. And I do see a lot of times where people say, and I've been guilty of this, help vets before you help the foreigner, right? Why aren't you helping vets? Why aren't you? And I do see it too. One side, helping everyone. And then on the other side, I think if you can't even help at home, how are you going to help everywhere else?
That's what I always say about the US of A, because we spend so much money and we do so many things for other countries that if you're not a healthy country, how can you go help everybody else? We have so many issues here that we are probably in worse shape if you look at our drug addictions, our alcohol addictions, the mental health issues, all the other things that go along with what's going on in America today. We are probably worse off than a lot of countries in the world.
Are we the pig? Do we just have lipstick on us? We put lipstick on a pig and we think we're pretty?
I think so.
I really do think that we are the person who's driving the nice car, the fancy car, and we are the person who's wearing the nice clothes and looking like we're rich when we are not.
Correct. And that's why I always tell you and everybody else, I'm just a simple guy. Because I'm not trying to be something I'm not.
But something to talk about tying into this, but the first part of our conversation, so we just had that plane. We actually had 2 planes, I believe, that have landed in California that have brought people, migrants from the border, or if you want to call them immigrants, illegal immigrants, asylees, refugees, any number of names that I have heard thrown around, that I believe our state attorney general said that they were going to start an investigation into who sent these people and that they were possibly kidnapped. The same thing that we heard when the individuals ended up on Martha's Vineyard. They
were kidnapped.
And
you can't kidnap the willing.
But my thought on this, so the state attorney general said something to the effect of some of them had Florida documents, therefore they're going to investigate Ron DeSantis for illegally sending these individuals here. And I thought that Gavin Newsom has been putting out the commercials on how terrible Florida is and how great California is. You think they'd be so excited to save them from having the possibility of living in Florida? Like, wouldn't you want to save them? They're here in California. That's half the battle. You got them here.
Well, that's what they said is come one, come all. Until they all started coming. Now they only want one to go. You are correct. They talk a lot, but when things actually happen, they sure start singing a different tune.
Definitely here in California, a different tune is being sung. Now they want to go after whoever would have the audacity to send these poor people on a plane to California. And just to touch on the naming thing again, if you listen to AOC, she'll call them asylees. If you listen to others, they'll call them refugees. And they'll say that they're fleeing their terrible home location and they're coming to the United States so they don't get kidnapped, murdered, die, insert all kinds of things that these people are running from. But then I think it was CNN was doing an interview as to why someone was there, and they said they were an economic migrant. Basically, they're here for the money. They want to work, which is not, when you illegally come to the United States, saying that you're here to work is not a lawful way to immigrate. So then that would mean they're not a true asylee. And I want to say something like the number is 1%. 1% fall into that refugee/asylee category that are presenting themselves at the border.
Wasn't it amazing how quiet the Filipino folks are? They've been on waiting lists for years and years and years.
Decades.
Yes, you don't hear them complaining.
And they should be the first ones. Those who have been waiting for decades should be the first ones to have all of their families come in all at once. If you're allowing economic migrants to just illegally cross the border and say that you want them to stay, you should also be all about family reunification. And then say, go to Congress, get rid of all those numbers because they're capped by a certain percentage, and say, no, we're going to allow everyone who's on the waiting list to come right now.
Absolutely, and they should. If we have open borders right now and we're just allowing anybody from any country to come in, then we should let them come in as well. They should be taking ships over and planes and flying them over here. Everyone that's been on the waiting list more than 5 years should be allowed to come over right now.
Immediately.
Agreed. Do you know who Stephen A. Smith is? Name ring a bell?
It sounds familiar.
We talked about him a while back ago, as one of my old managers would say. He is an ESPN news guy.
Okay, yes.
And he is actually one of the, I would call, heavy hitters, or somebody that has a good platform with which to speak from. He has come out and said that even though he voted for Joe Biden, he believes that someone else in the Democratic Party needs to be the nominee for 2024.
Captain Sandbag, Captain Trip and Fall, Captain hit his head at the same weekend on Marine One. I feel kind of bad, and then again I don't, for making fun of a man in his 80s.
The elderly?
The elderly. That seems so wrong, and I'm probably on getting ticky marks. Jesus is like, yeah, that's one more ticky mark for her. She's not doing too well.
Well, Mr. Stephen A. thinks the same thing because of his age and him continuously falling. He needs to step aside.
And let's be clear, I fall too. I mean, if you were to put me on the national stage, I bet you I would trip over that sandbag. I would hit my head. I don't know if I'm tall enough, but on Marine One, I don't doubt that I would end up in those same categories at different times, especially considering how unbalanced I can be. Read into that however you want. I'm unbalanced. But one of the things that I've come to realize is he works about 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, maybe. He's always getting his weekends off. And this is not a job you want somebody to have weekends off. When you run for president, you know it's a 24/7 job. Yes, they get, little leeway, little vacation here, little vacation there. Sometimes they have to delay it. Sometimes they have to come back early. And they get little pieces off. But the fact that he is barely present, and when he is present, can't get out of his own way, just signals how much of a decline in health he's had. Mental acuity down.
Yes, and it also tells the rest of the world how weak he is and how weak we are at the present time, because he is supposed to be the leader of the free world. Supposedly, we are the most powerful nation in the world, and currently, right now, we have the weakest person in charge of the most powerful nation in the world.
I wonder if Pete Buttigieg would have done a better job.
Well, you know who Stephen A. thinks will do a better job?
Who?
And would win hands down in a landslide? Michelle Obama.
I would have to agree that she would win in a landslide. I think if she were to run, but then they would have to give up all their extras, all their connections that they made, the stuff that gets them millions of dollars now, provided he would still be able, President Obama would still be able to do some of the stuff that he does to make his millions. But do you think they want to give up all of those staying on private billionaire island time, having multiple homes, having to live back in the White House again?
Well, they shouldn't, because I think every person has their day, and she may win, but that would not make her a good qualified leader. She was a first lady.
Okay, but she has a very similarly situated background to Obama, went to law school, graduated law school, has her law degree, and I believe she actually worked as a lawyer, whereas he
did not.
So I would say that she was even more qualified.
Well, I like his number 2 and 3 choice.
Okay, who are 2 and 3?
2 was the CEO of Disney.
Oh, the Iger?
Yes. And number 3 was he thinks Hillary Clinton should make another go.
No, she should Clinton herself. She should come up with a dossier on herself and get herself out of there.
Well, here's the thing that miffs me. If you look at the two political parties and then you slice and dice those into to right, to left, to center right, to center left, Stephen A. says that he is socially liberal, okay, which would be a left Republican or a rhino.
Yes.
But he says he is fiscally conservative.
That's how, okay, so I've described myself in the same way. Although I say I'm socially more moderate, I'm not, when it comes to that, I'm not a nice cold conservative. I'm socially more moderate. I would not say liberal, but socially more moderate and definitely fiscally conservative. We do not use our money well in this country, and even when it's for a good cause, we manage to muck it up.
True, but I don't know how you qualify the two with him, because if you're fiscally conservative, you cannot believe a majority of what a democratic mindset believes in, because they believe in spend yourself into a deficit until you have nothing left. Then you spend more. So he should not vote for people that are not financially conservative, or he's got to find that balance, because somebody like Biden has never had that balance.
It would be a rhino that he should get behind. Really, they, not all of them, but they tend to be socially more moderate. Not every time, but sometimes they're fiscally more moderate, which would not be okay with him. Or almost a Joe Manchin type.
Joe Manchin or a Mitt Romney type.
Yes.
I just found that interesting.
That would be interesting. I don't agree with the Clinton assessment. I do agree that Biden should not be the nominee. They're circling the wagons already because he is him. I don't know what other way to say it. He's already there, so they're already circling the wagons around him. And you have individuals who refuse to run because they don't want to upset the apple cart. But you have the former Twitter CEO who has come out for Kennedy.
Is that the one that got fired?
Jack Dorsey. Yeah, he's been fired twice.
Yeah, well, the way Twitter was set up, I wouldn't trust him for anything. It's amazing how these power brokers like him and guys that run and own like Facebook and Costco and Amazon all actually believe the same as Stephen A.
The vast majority of Americans right now, although many of them seemingly won't publicly say it, they're privately saying it, that Biden should not be the nominee.
And since I thought this was a country of the people, then 300 million of us should stand up and say, you know what? We don't want you to run, from a Republican perspective and from a Democratic perspective, because honestly, the Democratic Party is doing the Democrats no justice by putting him there, unless they know that on her own, she cannot get elected, and she would be Kamala Harris.
She can't get elected.
However, if they can hide him again, work some magic like they did, get him back in office, I guarantee you, there's other people probably out there saying this, she will be the president at one point or another.
I already thought she was going to be, to tell you the truth. My expectation was they would either use the 25th Amendment. 25th?
I think it's 25th.
They would either do that, or he would take a tumble that incapacitates him.
And unfortunately for him, that may still happen.
But I don't see her getting elected. But then again, if she's the president, would they circle around her?
Well, probably.
The same way.
And maybe that's why she's playing a little bit on the dumb side. I don't know. Because she went to law school. She cannot be this far out there. Makes no sense.
Well, if she were to become president, maybe she would finally have her own opinions that she would be allowed to vocalize.
Correct.
So going to Clinton, though, they're investigating Clinton again. Well, the Clinton Foundation. There is a U.S. tax judge that is investigating the Clinton Foundation. And I personally think they're just going to get away with everything all over again, because every time they get caught in something,
you think,
they walk out of it. So I still don't see Clinton as a good nominee. Not now, not ever. And then she created the fake dossier that cost the United States millions of dollars.
And that within itself should land her in jail. But these people are smart enough and they have enough protection behind them that they're able to skirt the actual law and get away with stuff.
Right, because they also got caught, I think, holding on to 1,500 documents that were supposed to be turned over, but they called them privileged documents, attorney-client privilege type of thing, and didn't turn over the document that was the Clinton campaign side of things. A contractor withheld 1,500 documents from special counsel John Durham, who was doing the whole investigation. So she's caught on multiple sides, and it still is nothing.
Well, they're part of that power broker elite that we always talk about, and they will get away with things until the day they depart the natural and head towards the spiritual, whatever their spiritual is, up, down, or somewhere in between.
And something else that was a bit of untruthfulness, the January 6 footage. So 2 things have recently come out on the January 6 footage. One, there is a release of a tape showing Nancy Pelosi's daughter casually filming while they were being evacuated from the Capitol grounds. And no one was in a real hurry or whatnot. She was just filming what was going on around her. So not showing this unease or fear that was claimed by the Pelosi camp. But then new raw footage that was released has shown that the sound that was played with the video during the January 6 hearings was added after the fact.
It was all dubbed.
It was. So when we're having this moment, oh my God, they're saying this and this is happening in the video had no sound. So it was doctored and attached to the video.
And this is not far left or far right conspiracies. You can look this up for yourself on mainstream outlets and you can find everything that we're talking about.
So I did want to talk about the jab. Johnson & Johnson has requested that the approval for their jab be rescinded.
Why is that?
No one's asking for it. All of the lots that they have made have expired or have been used, but they would be past expiry. And they are not going to make more because there's not a demand for it. So Johnson & Johnson is asking that the government remove authorization for their jab.
Well, it's interesting that I never heard much about Johnson & Johnson. You heard more about Pfizer and Moderna.
That's because theirs wasn't based on the mRNA. It was a traditional jab.
And I wonder how much is left of Moderna's and Pfizer's.
They have been attempting to make new ones based on the new strain, so they're still in the market trying to be the one that creates the shot that cures all.
Well, I wish they would create the shot that cures all, and I wish they would find a time machine. I wish they would find a wishing well that wishes us all well and gives us eternal life. Oh, wait a minute, there is such a place, and it's not here.
It is not here.
You know who else is not here?
Who?
In California?
Who is not here in California?
Allstate Insurance. Do you know why?
They can't make enough money after all of the fires, the cost to rebuild, all of the new requirements for rebuilding, cost of housing.
Did you cheat off of my notes?
I did not, but State Farm just withdrew too, and I thought it was going to affect our insurance, but it turns out if you already have it, they will let you keep it, at least for the time being, but they are not writing new policies.
You are 100% correct, so I don't have to read any of this. State Farm is out. Allstate's out. If you have an existing policy, they will renew it. However, they will not give you new policies. And what the ultimate goal is there, which I think is along with counties and city municipalities, is to push everybody out of the hills and back down into dense population centers. And they won't have to worry about anything but the trees. And here we go again, though. This is that thing. Someone creates a problem. Then they say there is the solution. I don't mean the insurance company. I mean forestry departments, the state and the feds. they created these burn problems by not properly managing the forests. So then when there's these massive fires and there's loss of life and there's loss of property and animals, who suffers?
The common folk.
Again, with just a different avenue, the common folk suffer and we have to pay. It's interesting that I have boat insurance for my boat. However, when there is a catastrophe like a hurricane or tornado or something back on the East Coast and Midwest, guess what happens to my policies?
It goes up.
And I'm wondering if Allstate and State Farm were doing the same thing in kind, as if when there was something here, they were raising the rates there to help offset the cost of the high construction builds and the insurance in general.
Yeah, from what I read, they just reached a point where housing was costing too much to rebuild. So if you had a policy on a home, let's say you bought your home for $300,000 and you could go down the street and buy another home, similarly situated condition for $300,000 or $400,000. But if your house burned down and you wanted to rebuild it, because of everything nowadays, it was going to cost $800,000 to rebuild. They can't afford those housing costs to rebuild it. So the person can just go get another home. They don't want to insure for those costs.
So wouldn't it not be like risk versus reward? Would it not be like buying stocks while you're in the working world? That you hope that you make money. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And I thought insurance companies hedge their bets that they would not have to pay out.
So because some of these areas are getting hard hit and repeatedly hit and they know it, they are getting out of the market because they're not winning. And that they're in the business to make money. So if they know that a market is bad and is going to continually lose them money, they're going to get out of it. And that is what they've decided to do. So they tried to hedge their bets, and apparently they would also insure with each other to try and even out all of the risk that was happening. So an insurance company might insure a person or a company, and then that insurance company would actually turn around and take out a policy themselves with another insurance company so they could kind of move around and ease that burden if they lost money.
Yes, and I think Lloyd's of London actually invented that back in the day.
So they've decided that they're not making money. They out.
So would you like to hear something kind of pathetic? We talk a lot about crime and murder,
Yes.
rapes, accidents.
Yes.
So there is a man, and I'm not going to give you his name. He's on Missouri's death row, right as we speak right now. And he is on an emotional roller coaster. There are efforts out there to spare his life. So the man killed 2 prison guards trying to help another person escape in 2000. And it was a failed attempt, so he went to court. He was found guilty. And then he also must have had a retrial because in 2010, he was resentenced. Well, now his attorneys are saying that he was 18 years old, didn't know what he was doing. He was brought up by bad parents and ignored. Therefore, they feel that he should not get death, but he should be granted clemency. So they're trying right now with the governor to get him clemency based on that, and that one of the jurors may have been an illiterate, which is illegal under Missouri law.
Yeah, you're required to understand the English language in order to be a juror in most places.
Well, that makes perfect sense, but now they've tried to stay the execution. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case. They said, nope, we'll go ahead and continue with it. Then a federal judge blocked it, said, no, you can't execute. And then they appealed, and they said, no, you must execute. So, the 3 letters that I come up with is WTH. What the heck?
So this is one of the areas that when I would work in immigration, making a decision, I would try not to have any feelings about a case Don't get me wrong, sometimes I could be upset over a case, or it was a good case, it was a nice case, it was great to see the person sworn in as a citizen, it was heartfelt and touching. But when I adjudicated the cases, I wanted to be even keeled, and I did not want my feelings to play any role in how I adjudicated that case. Because would it be fair if I did? So if I was extra happy one day and excited and everything was good, and I let my feelings be involved, I approve everyone, I want everyone else to be happy too, versus if I'm having a bad day and I'm angry and I'm going to throw the book at you, when if I was having a regular day, I might still deny you, but I wouldn't throw the book at you. Or maybe the 51 leans on your side because I'm not quite so angry and I'm seeing it from a different light. But if I had feelings about it, oh, hey, this person killed somebody, but now they're tugging at my heartstrings, I want them to live. Whereas the other guy, I don't really like him, so it's okay, he could die, but the facts of the case are the same. I think we get into a problem area if we let our feelings decide which way we should go on this. What are the facts of the case? Okay, yes, mitigating circumstance, he had a poor upbringing. But against him is he murdered 2 people, and now their families are left without ever having them in their life again. Maybe that gave one of their kids, I'm assuming they have kids, but maybe they don't, an excuse to become angry with the world and murder too. Are you cool with that? Like, okay, so how many down the line? Oh, well, his dad got murdered, so let's let the murderer out and let's let the kid who grows up to murder, let's let him free too. He had a bad life situation.
Correct. And let me correct myself, since he was just in county lockup at the time. It was 2 jailers that he killed, not 2 prison guards. And the interesting thing was it didn't show what the original case was, why he was even in county lockup. So did he commit a murder and this became 3 murders? I don't know, because it did not talk about what he was originally in jail for. But I have no empathy. I have empathy for the fact that maybe he had a terrible upbringing. But there's a lot of people, and when I say a lot, probably hundreds of thousands that have bad upbringings that are able to get around that.
Not kill people.
And not kill people. Maybe they're not the greatest member of society, but they do make it through and become productive members of society and not kill and not go to jail and not do the things that this young person did.
Yeah. We have bad people who do bad things and good people who end up doing bad things. And we've talked a lot about it, just you and I personally, about situations that arise when a good person ends up doing a bad thing and they turn their life around, or they end up living a completely different life. So one that has been brought to my attention as of late is Harvey Milk. Given that it's Pride Month, for some individuals, his name has come up a lot because he was at the forefront of the LGBT push back in the 60s and 70s, and he lived in San Francisco, and I believe he was a council person in San Francisco. But his bad act was when he was 30, he dated for 5 years a child, started as a child, 16-year-old, and then up until that individual turned 21. In California, that's not lawful, whether you are a part of a community or not. 30 years old, dating a 16-year-old, having a relationship with a 16-year-old is not lawful. Even back then in California, or now in California, it should not be lawful. So we celebrate all of this individual's good acts and we overlook his bad acts. But why? Why do we have to celebrate someone? He did one bad act, or one bad act for several years, really. And then here we are supposed to overlook that and celebrate it. So if we say that the person was good and then they murdered 2 people and then they were good again, are we okay with letting them out? Are we okay with saying, okay, he did one bad thing? Or if it's a really, really bad thing, sometimes there's no overcoming that really, really bad thing. You went in there, let's just say it was a shoplifting charge or a light charge, but then you murdered 2 people. It wasn't manslaughter. It wasn't accidental.
Yes, and that's just like when our first black president announced he was running, and the folks he used to hang around with when he was a little bit younger, and one of them was part of the Weather Underground, which bombed federal buildings and people were injured. And we touted him as a great individual after he became a college professor.
Great area, I guess. My try not to have feelings on it. It's not always going to be black and white because you'll take mitigating factors into consideration. But that you would do at the time that they were being sentenced. What were the mitigating factors? Presumably they took them into consideration unless they did not know them at the time. But if the defense attorney did not present any mitigating factors as to why this person shouldn't be put on death row, then you go after the attorney and you appeal the case based on ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, if he wants to go that direction, if that's what happened, go that direction and see what the Supreme Court so far has said. They're not taking it up. But I believe the cases that they actually take up are so minimal that the Supreme Court not taking it up is not a surprise.
No, because that's only one individual of potentially thousands of cases that are going on right now. They don't have time to handle and look at each and every one of them.
And the Supreme Court justices are tasked with an area that they cover. So this person being from Missouri, there's a particular Supreme Court justice who is tasked with looking, or also all of their help, is tasked with looking at every case that comes up in this manner, and they hardly take up any cases. In a general sense, it's presumed, I guess, that most of them are being handled effectively.
Right. And, going back to Harvey Milk, I'm sure that just like, why did we remove all the statues from the Civil War era?
Because they were all bad people who did bad things. Even if they were good people who did one good thing or two good things, their bad acts caused them to get their statues removed.
Okay, so then we should use the same analogy and the same thought process with him, is that I'm sure there's thousands of people out there in the LGBT community that have done great things within their community that they could tout during this time and just remove his name from history.
So someone who was in the LGBT community was a former Navy SEAL, and he was in the T part of the community. He transitioned from a male to a female because he was a Navy SEAL. So there are no female Navy SEALs. So male Navy SEAL transitioned back in 2013.
Back to a guy.
He is now detransitioned.
Yes.
So go ahead.
He should have tried going through buds again as a female, and he would have been the first female to make it through SEAL training.
So this particular individual, his name is Chris Beck. He very publicly and loudly transitioned. CNN did a piece. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but he just basically did a big media tour, finding himself and transitioning from a himself to a herself. So as a woman, Chris Beck went by Kristen. And Kristen decided to become a therapist because Kristen wanted to help others and to understand how to better help others going through the same thing, and maybe not go through it so late in life, go through it earlier. So actually started studying the gender industry and gender dysphoria. And this year has now publicly said, or last year, sorry, so through this past year, has now detransitioned and has begun to warn the public about the whole gender industry. So what he had to say was, one of the biggest pieces of data that they're missing right now is that 80% of the kids who are going through gender dysphoria or gender confusion, either before puberty or during puberty, 80% of those kids are corrected. They will get rid of all of that gender confusion by the time puberty is over. That's 80%. And this is without drugs. And this is without surgery. That their confusion time frame is essentially through puberty, when your brain is the most wonky and everything's just going, across. So what she learned, what she began to learn actually helped her to transition back to a man, realizing that she did not need to be a she, that she was in fact a he and always was a he. So all of the health experts that helped him to transition and him studying all of this himself led to his understanding and better understanding of the problems with the gender industry. And it's an industry.
So long of the short is, kids will be kids. After puberty's over, they'll figure it out and they'll move on in whatever direction their mind and body tell them to go into without the help of an industry.
Yes. And it's a medical industry. So more of what Chris Beck found out was that if a kid goes on puberty blockers when they're 13, 14, and 15 years old, they are chemically castrated. They're not going to have children when they get older. They're not given that data. 8 of those kids out of the 10 are going to want to go back to being a regular old person, and they're not going to be able to. So they are forever attached to the gender industry. Even if they attempt to go back, they will now need more medications to help them go back. But physically, they won't be able to get there, especially if they've had surgeries and taken these puberty blockers.
And they could be one of the stats that ends up on the street, ends up homeless, ends up drug addicted, or just flat out takes their own life.
And maybe they're taking their own life because they were never fully treated correctly in the first place.
Correct.
Instead, they were told to go down this terrible rabbit hole that ends up hurting them for the rest of their life. Boy, that was heavy.
Yeah, it was.
That was heavy.
Do you believe in global warming?
No.
Or climate change?
Yes. But in a different way. I believe that the climate is changing, but I do believe in natural climate change, just like I believe things have evolved.
So global warming or climate change is another cottage industry, just like the medical industry towards the T word.
Yes.
So the Irish government, in their infinite wisdom, is looking at killing 200,000 of their cows.
Because cows make the world a warmer place?
Yes. They're going to do it over a 3-year time frame. They're going to try to knock down their greenhouse gases.
Can't you have natural cow attrition?
Yes.
Why do you got to kill them?
Correct. They're going to knock down 10% of their herd.
Is this also the push to get us to be vegetarians?
And the artificial meat that some guy that invented a computer has been pushing pretty hard the last few years.
He sold the computer. He marketed the computer. I don't think he was the brains of the operation.
He was not.
But very smart man, because he's a billionaire.
Yes. So my guy, Elon Musk.
Elon Musk saves the world.
He does. And his comment was to them, killing 200,000 cows or even one cow is not going to make one bit of difference to climate change. Not one. Could kill them all. Still not going to do anything. Because if you look at the numbers of the cattle, most of the small ranchers there, one lady has come out and said, you know what? My family has had the same number of cows for 40 years. So what about the transportation industry? Is it the same? Absolutely not.
I want all of the people who say that you eating meat is the problem, or that you flying commercially is the problem. You know, the same ones that get on their private jets, jet set everywhere, live in their big houses. The Al Gore versus George Bush, where you have someone who has a very well and green home, and then you have Al Gore, who has a monstrosity of a house that is not very green friendly, doing the opposites of what they claim that they want for the rest of society. I wish they would all just get together and live in a bubble.
Well, and that was her point as it related to aviation. What about all you jet setters that are flying around the world creating all these gases and telling us that we're the problem when we're not?
And how many of these people have never flown anywhere? I meet people all the time. I love flying. I'm big into flying. The worst part of flying to me is going through TSA. That's gives me so much anxiety.
I was talking about that to somebody last Thursday at work because I'm in aviation, as you know. I work for an airline, and we used to be able to do things a lot differently pre 9/11, and it absolutely bites now what control TSA has to try to keep us safe. And I think they could go backwards a little ways on some of the stuff they're doing, some of the policies, because I think we've got this under control, and they're not going to go that route this next time. I don't think they'll use airplanes.
Well, and then they don't want to profile, which is something I believe Israel does. They profile. They look, and Turkey does it too, if I'm not mistaken. But they don't want to profile because that's mean, to look at people who are most likely to disrupt a flight. And that could be individuals who appear to be, I don't know, Karens. How many Karens have interrupted flights? I guess I might look like a Karen, so I could end up getting pulled off a flight because I have that look about me. No.
You have that scowl.
No, but to say that we have, the problem is I'm flying a commercial flight, and then the next guy who is flying a private jet and has multiple private jets, it's okay because he has money. He has money. He bought the green credits. He has money. He can do whatever he wants. Oh, but me, person who flies with hundreds of other people on a plane together to get to a place, we're the bad guys.
You are a bad guy and bad girl. Stop it. You know who else is bad?
Oxford College?
They're bad.
Who else is bad?
Teachers' unions across the nation.
And Miss Weingarten, who continues to lie and attempt to change history.
Yeah, specifically in Maryland.
Oh, what happened in Maryland?
So the NAACP has called out local leaders and state officials, stating that the current outcome for black students is intolerable and unacceptable. The academics that are taking place right now in high schools is abysmal. The test scores. You have several students that tested as high school seniors at the elementary school reading level. Out of 470 some that were tested, 40 of them could not read at the kindergarten level. The NAACP has said that they have tried to work with the teachers' unions and with the leadership and with state and local leaders to no avail. So now they're going to have a big powwow the middle of the month to see what they can do to start fixing this.
Do you know what New Jersey has decided to do to help fix the low passage rate?
Yeah, they're going to dumb down all the kids.
They are. They're actually going to dumb down the tests, so that way instead of 39%, they can get more than double to pass if they made the test easier. That's their answer for it. Instead of lifting people up, we're bringing people down and calling it a good quality education.
Yeah, and it's an interesting comment by the NAACP that young black students are capable of attaining great test scores just like other kids throughout the nation. Well, 100%. I feel that all kids are smart, of all ethnic backgrounds. The leadership has failed them.
Our leadership is definitely the problem. Our leadership in the school systems, and what I was saying about Miss Weingarten, is texts have now been revealed to show that the teachers' union was working with the CDC to keep schools closed. And what did that do for the children? It harmed them irreparably. I'd like to say it is repairable, but we can't keep doing the same things and repair it. We have to do better. And she's got to go. She fought to keep kids out of the classroom. She fought to make sure kids weren't the ones who were being helped. And that's the whole idea behind our schools, is that we're supposed to help the kids, and that advances society.
Correct. And she should be fired, voted out of office, whatever, however you get her out of her position.
And my comment on Oxford was they can now expel students for using the wrong pronouns.
I think the people that are coming up with these rules should be expelled for being knuckleheads. And I want to go to one thing we talked about weeks ago, which was warships within the Navy that were being retired early and new stealth warships. Well, I was in SoCal for Fleet Week last week.
Wonderful.
I saw a stealth trimaran Independence class coastal combat ship Friday and Saturday of last week.
That sounds neat.
It was very cool. The only thing was, though, I don't know why I was able to see it, because it was a stealth ship.
It's stealth, not invisible.
Oh, okay. But it was cool.
That's awesome.
It was.
So do you know what happens to businesses that are continually stolen from and people come in and loot?
Well, if they can't get it under control, they shut down and leave.
Yes, and we've talked about how certain individuals want to force these businesses to stay in business even though they're losing money. They aren't making any money, and somehow we want to force them to stay in business. Well, a Walgreens is trying something new in Chicago. And what they've decided to do is there are only 2 rows in which individuals can come in and like physically touch, pick up the merchandise and go pay for it. And everything else is kept under lock and key. So you have to have a worker go and pick out your items for you, because they've had so much theft that this is how they're trying to combat the losing money problem, because there's no arrest and jail time for some of these individuals that are robbing and stealing. I think Walgreens claims that they're testing a new experience with new concepts and technologies in order to enhance customer experience and the team members' experience. And do you know what is being said about this new attempt?
Racist.
It is racist because they're doing it in Chicago. Therefore, the anti-theft Walgreens is racial profiling.
So we should go to some black-owned businesses there that have the same issue and see how they're handling it.
I just thought it was interesting that they would call it racial profiling when I'm pretty sure they're not doing it to Walgreens that have never been heavily stolen from. They're doing it to the Walgreens that has had problems, and they're trying to recoup, revamp, and come up with a new idea. So how is it racial profiling if you're doing it in the Walgreens that has the problem?
It's not, and it's that line I use all the time, which is wash, rinse, repeat. They keep using this same old worn out line because that's what usually gets the most traction. Everything's racist, even though it's not. And it takes away from the true racism around the country and around the world. And they're not able to address those because everybody is too scared. When you try to fix a theft problem, it becomes a race problem. So I went to a scuba show. There just happened to be the head coroner of LA County teaching a class, a seminar that I went to.
You seminared while you were there?
I seminared several seminars. This particular seminar was called Why Do Divers Die?
Oh, that's a good seminar, so you can do the opposite of that and live.
Absolutely. And then where does it go once a diver does die through the autopsy process? Do they get autopsied? On and on. Well, an interesting stat from the coroner is 65,000 people die in Los Angeles County every year. Of those, 25,000 fall under the coroner's jurisdiction. Of those, 10,000 are cleared or rejected, no contact or evaluation of the body. 15,000 of them are actually investigated. Of those, 7,000 are autopsied. So of that number, generally there's 2 to 4 a year that die while scuba diving. So it's a very low number. We went over a couple of cases that happened in 2022, and we went over a couple of cases that happened a couple of years prior. And they were all four interesting cases. What caught my ear the most was when the coroner talked about COVID. And not about the shot and not about your beliefs and none of that. It was the fact that all the excess deaths that they had to rent up to 40 shipping containers and up to 20 refrigerated trailers. With out of that number now in 2023, they still have over 17 of them they're still utilizing, and they're slowly returning those. They actually have 3 or 4 of them filled still. And here's the reasoning behind them doing that in the excess deaths. COVID was so confusing for people in LA and LA County because of misinformation on all sides. Okay. That a lot of older folks, whether they had comorbidities, that new term we learned, or just not doing well, they stopped going to the doctor. They stopped taking their medicine. They stopped going to pharmacies and getting their medicines. They let their health lapse. So a majority of the excess death people in these trailers was not from COVID. It was from being scared to death, literally.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll ever know the true numbers based on the numbers that you've pointed out. They can't possibly autopsy enough in order to find out what happened in each case. But there were so many people that were absolutely afraid to go anywhere, do anything, or do any part of their routine, which, as you noted, was take their medication. They were also told to stay out of places that might make them healthy, like a gym, staying healthy. We got scared out of going to all of these places. So then what do you do if you need help? It's too late. Your medication was your help. That's pretty interesting.
Yes.
Sad.
It is very sad that we get to a point where there's so much misinformation on all sides that we don't know what to do. And older folks, I mean in their late 60s, early 70s, late 70s, early 80s. There were some youngsters in there, but mostly old folks.
Well, and we've seen the U.S. life expectancy go down, and it went down, I would imagine, in part because we were too scared to go anywhere to help save us. So if we were already taking medications and now we have excess deaths, our life expectancy on average is going to go down.
And our educational system is going to get battered, and our supply chain is going to get destroyed. And there was a lot of things that happened in a 2.5-year period.
Absolutely. One of the things we did see, though, was Elizabeth Holmes was convicted. She attempted to appeal her sentence for her line about how they could test a small amount of blood and get all of these different results in micro blood testing. She is now reported to jail, or to prison technically, where she will be for the next 11 years unless she gets her sentence reduced, her appeal works out in her favor, or I don't know if they do time off for good behavior, but she is now in prison in Texas.
So she's one blood test away from an early release.
So I'm going to jump back on the Clinton train and the Biden train for just a moment here. So there was a whistleblower case, and the person blowing the whistle was reporting to the IRS that the Clinton Foundation accepted foreign money and then attempted to influence and change U.S. policy. And I don't know if they were just reporting it to the IRS or to the feds in general. That part of it was unclear to me. But when you blow the whistle to the IRS, if somebody's not paying their taxes or their fair share of taxes, should it be a taxable amount of money, the whistleblower can actually get a percentage.
Ooh, bonus check.
Of that money. Now, if you are an attempted whistleblower and you're getting shut down at every avenue of blowing the whistle, then it could be a loss of money by you having brought it out, and then they're not going to investigate it. Although it was never technically your money until they found them guilty.
Well, and it could be detrimental to your career, and potentially, if it's against a Clinton,
Your life.
Yes.
So there is a claim that the Clinton Foundation accepted foreign money and then attempted to influence changes in U.S. policy. They would still be required to register as a foreign agent, whoever within the foundation was doing that. And that's the same with Hunter Biden. He was accepting foreign money, even if it was through one of his businesses, and then attempting to influence. He should have to register as a foreign agent. So there was just recently a conviction that involved donations of up to millions of dollars to the 2012 Obama campaign, and it was by one of the Fugees. Pross was convicted of 10 counts, including conspiracy, witness tampering, concealment of material fact, making false entries in records, and serving as an unregistered foreign agent. So it's a violation of FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act. And he was attempting to bundle money and give it to Obama, and then also get into all of these different venues to actually talk to Obama to attempt to influence based on who he was doing business on behalf of. So not registering as a foreign agent actually got him caught up, and the DOJ successfully prosecuted this individual. Now, mind you, that was from 2012. That was when the act was committed. It was for his 2012 re-election. Actually, it was before that, but it was for the 2012 presidential campaign. So here we are 11 years later, and we have a conviction. Maybe in 11 years, we'll see Biden go down. Failure to register. Do you think they'll ever prosecute Hunter Biden?
Most likely not, which he should be. So I did see an interesting tidbit kind of along those lines, was the fact that 9 people that have come forward claiming that the Bidens did all this illegal stuff are either in jail, being prosecuted, or hiding.
Yeah, you want to wreck your life? Come out against a Democrat.
Roger that.
So I want to touch on Haiti because we brought up Haiti before on this podcast. So Haiti has had big problem for many years with gang violence. And they will attack people, steal from people, brutalize people, kidnap people for money. Well, the people of Haiti have had enough, apparently. And now they are seeing a rise in vigilante justice. And this rise in vigilante justice has led to a dramatic reduction in the gang violence that has plagued Haiti. But it is a brutal vigilante campaign. Apparently, it began in April when a group of people overpowered the police in Haiti's capital of Port-au-Prince. And then they took 14 alleged gang members into their custody, doused them with gasoline, and burned them to death.
So they're making a statement.
They are. And since that day in April, civilians have reportedly killed at least 160 additional gang members in that area. And since that point, there has been a sharp drop in kidnappings and killings that have been attributed to gangs.
Well, good. Sometimes you have to meet force with force. If that's what it takes to maybe help right their ship, we shall see. Because I know that's like homeless there in Haiti. We have spent billions upon billions of dollars rebuilding and trying to prop up that country. And not just us, countries from all over the world.
Right. One of the more recent situations that I remember was the earthquake, an earthquake that struck in January of, I believe it was 2010. They were hit by a big earthquake. And then after that, they saw a huge cholera outbreak because they had so many people who were homeless. There was essentially 1 million people living in tents, close quarters. And so they had a cholera outbreak, and it was a very bad situation. But it has been a very bad situation for Haiti for many years. And if we've poured in billions and billions of dollars to that country from all over the world, they should be in a much better situation. And as you noted, it's just like the homeless situation where we pour in billions and we're worse off than before.
Well, I did hear a Haitian say once that the Clinton Foundation was nice enough to do AT&T phone store for them. Seriously.
I did not hear that one.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.